He was an incredible Maple Leafs NHL All-Star defenseman. Just imagine how good his career could have been. Bashin Bill Barilko, the legend. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Today's program, we look back at a Canadian legend. He was born in Timmins, Ontario in 1927. He played 5 seasons with the Maple Leafs. He was a defenseman, a 3-time NHL All-Star. He won 4 Stanley Cups. He's the subject of 50 mission cap by the tragically hip. He scored the game-winning goal in the 1951 Stanley Cup final. He died in August of 1951. He had his jersey retired by the Maple Leafs. We're talking about the legend of Bashin Bill Barilko. Joining us to tell the Bill Barilko story, we have a Windsor native, Toronto author, hockey historian, an all-round fan, a professor at Seneca College, editorial and education facilitator for the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's written 20 sports books, including Barilko, Without a Trace. Kevin Shea is on the program today, and Bill Barilko's eldest nephew, marketing consultant, founded FSK Enterprise. He's an adjunct faculty instructor at the University of Minnesota, University of St. Thomas, and Augsburg University. He knew Bill personally. We were talking about Bill Barilko's eldest nephew, Frank Klisanich. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
So nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to have you guys with us. Now, I just want to recite the words from 50 mission cap by the tragically hip. Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was on a fishing trip. The last goal he ever scored won the Leafs the cup. They didn't win another till 1962, the year he was discovered. I stole this from a hockey card I keep tucked up under my 50 mission cap. Now, the Leafs have a framed handwritten copy of Gord Downie's lyrics to the song in Private Players Lounge. Barilko, his banner was lowered every time the hip played at the ACC or Maple Leaf Gardens. Many had wondered, of course, whether the song was for real. And of course, gentlemen, you're going to tell us today it definitely was. Now, Bill was of Ukrainian heritage. We know that. Frank, what can you tell us about the Barilko family?
Well, I was born in Timmins the year that Billy disappeared, and he was. We were fascinated with the story of Bill Barilko. But in my early years in Timmins, we didn't talk about Billy, and only in my later years, as I got teenager and into my 20s, I realized we didn't talk about Bill Barilko because my grandmother Baba was still grieving the loss of her son.
What did your family tell you? I know you were very young when he was born, or when he died. You were very young when you were born. When he was just before he died. What can you tell us about what you knew about your Uncle Bill?
Well, we knew all about Billy because my mother was a fabulous scrapbook collector. She kept all the articles and put them into scrapbooks that we could read about and see pictures of Bill. And the memorabilia that we have in our possession, that I have in the possession that you see over my head, Baba gave that to my mom. She, in turn, as she was getting older, handed it to me and asked me to take care of it. So we learned all about him through pictures and stories, and a great man named Kevin Shea.
Right.
Thank you, Frank.
Well, Kevin, I know you took the story of Bill Barilko. You picked up that ball and ran with it. No doubt about that. What can you add to what Frank just told us about Bill and his family life and in Timmins, growing up in Timmins?
Well, the family was relatively poor. Bill's father was a cook, a chef with the mines. Mom was a stay-at-home mom, took good care of her 3 children, Alex, the oldest, and then Bill, and then, as Frank mentioned, his mom, the wonderful Anne. And they lived a hard scrabble life. They were immigrants to the country, and at least the parents were, and they found it was they were looking for streets that were paved with gold. They found out the streets were paved with cold, as I talk about so often. It's just Northern Ontario was a whole different life for them all as well. But Bill grew up like his brother, like his sister, as having great fun in the outdoors. Alex was a terrific athlete, and Bill really looked up to his older brother and got involved with athletics just like his older brother did. And then Anne, who was the chronicler of the whole family history, she watched her two brothers as well, and just had a lovely life together, and really learned about the outdoors and learned about sports and grew up together as all of the families did in the Timmins area at that time.
Now, Frank, is it true that Bill was not a great skater and Alec was, and he was often put in goal? Is that what you heard as well? And that because he wasn't such a great skater, he got stuck between the pipes when they were playing the hockey games.
Yeah, that's how he started playing hockey, and because he wasn't a good skater, they put the goal stick in his hands and said, "You keep the puck out of the net." And he was so darn cold, he said, "I got to learn how to skate better so I don't have to be the goalie."
Yeah, it can get pretty boring back there. I understand that. Kevin, let's talk about his career a little bit. He played for the Holman Pluggers of the Northern Ontario Hockey League. And how did he end up with the Pluggers?
Well, so it goes back to his adulation for his brother to begin with. He wanted to be around all of the hockey players. His brother was on the team. They would be a juvenile team at the time. And so Bill was brought on board to help out in many ways. He was basically a stick boy, but because they only would use one goalie at the time, they would like a second goaltender to play in practices and scrimmages and things of that sort as well. So Bill would stand in net and be kind of a reserve goaltender for the Holman Pluggers as well. But the Pluggers, when you think about them, were an extraordinary team because you think about some of the players that played. Alex played senior hockey and was very, very close to playing in the National Hockey League. Went on to be an official actually as well. But there was guys like Alan Stanley on the team, Pete Babando, Eric Prentice, all guys who went on to the National Hockey League, along with some other really great guys who played senior hockey, who played in the mercantile hockey leagues in the Toronto area or in Northern Ontario as well. So that's where Bill really, really learned the game, watching this team play and playing with them on a regular basis as well.
So, Frank, it sounds like Bill was really a determined guy, had a lot of drive. Is that what you understand about your uncle?
Absolutely. And when I look at all the material on Billy, this young boy was playing hockey with his older brother and older men, and he learned how to skate better. And he was very determined. And you don't participate in the accomplishments that he realized, his dreams, without being determined.
So, Kevin,
maybe I can
let's
add
talk
something,
about.
Joe.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I was just going
Absolutely.
to say, I'm so sorry. Bill was so determined to improve his skating. Bill was, I don't know if he was not a good student necessarily. I think he just didn't go to school a whole lot because he wanted to skate. He skated and worked out, and because he enjoyed fishing and hunting and things of that sort, he missed a great deal of school, and as a result, he was put back a couple of times as well. But that determination to get better at skating so he didn't have to be the goaltender, so he could play with his brother and his friends, was really, really the defining factor for Bill that eventually took him to the National Hockey League. Sorry for stepping on you, Joe.
No, that's perfect. I love it. Anytime. So let's talk about playing in Hollywood, interestingly enough. Fitting, I suppose, for a guy with Hollywood good looks, right? Take that one, Kevin.
Sure, absolutely. So at the time, the Northern Ontario region was rife with terrific athletes. And whether that was because of the extended winters, because of the ice being available for a longer time or whatever, it's tough to say. But there were a lot of scouts who were just kind of looking around the Northern Ontario region, Timmins and Kirkland Lake and Rouyn-Noranda and places of that sort, Sudbury, et cetera, and finding really, really talented hockey players. And so one of the things that happened was a scout happened to see the fact that Bill and Alex were both pretty good hockey players and thought that maybe they could play for the Pittsburgh Hornets. And that was Toronto's American Hockey League affiliate. So invited them to training camp. It was accompanied by letters from Alex and Bill asking if they could join the team as well. And so what ended up happening is that they got to the training camp and were working out, and they were sent to the Pacific Coast Hockey League, and that was where the Hollywood Wolves played, and that's where Bill was put on the team. The Hollywood Wolves were now an affiliate of the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. So the way that it went was the pecking order was the National Hockey League being the highest. The Pittsburgh Hornets were next. They were in the American Hockey League. The Tulsa Oilers were next. They were in the U.S. Hockey League. And then the Hollywood Wolves in the Pacific Coast Hockey League. So Bill was sent there to get some seasoning, to work on his game, to work on his skating, etc. Alex, on the other hand, played with the Oakland Oaks. He played with a competing team in that league, but he did get to spend a great deal of time with his brother. And so Bill all of a sudden shows up in Hollywood. Now you have to think that it was a whole different world. It was an entirely different world for boys from Timmins who had never ventured outside of basically their city limits. All of a sudden, they're flying for the first time. They're going to Hollywood, the mecca of films, and both boys were big fans of the Hollywood movies, especially the Westerns. And so for Bill, all of a sudden to be parachuted into Hollywood was beyond belief. And so, I'm going to step ahead a tiny bit. But when Bill was summoned to join the Toronto Maple Leafs later on, we'll come back to the Hollywood in just a moment. But he contacted his mom and his sister and said, "I'm going to get a chance to come to Toronto to play with the Maple Leafs." And they were both so disappointed because they thought it was a step down. They couldn't imagine that Hollywood wasn't the peak of hockey stardom, and so they were kind of disappointed until some kids in the schoolyard told Anne, "Oh, your brother's name is going to be on the radio with Foster Hewitt." And then all of a sudden things started to click, and she realized, wait a minute, this is actually a pretty cool thing after all.
Yeah. Do you remember those? Do you remember your mom telling you about that scenario, Frank?
I'm sitting around the radio listening to Foster Hewitt.
Right.
Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean it was a Canadian tradition for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, that was from coast to coast. Growing up out west, it was the same situation. But okay, so now he takes that drop from Hollywood to the NHL, and now. So what was the buzz like around Timmins when Bill got called up by the Leafs, Frank?
Well, it's got to be big time because everybody in Timmins, other than my grandmother and my mother, realized he's going to the big team. He hasn't made a one-step jump. He's gone up 4 rings, and he's going into the big club. And the question is he going to stick? Is he going to stay on the team? And my understanding is that Billy basically said, "Well, boys, here I am. There's no turning back. I'm staying with the Leafs, and let's go get them."
He certainly did, didn't he, Kevin? And what were the circumstances of Bill being added to the Maple Leaf roster?
It was really a fortuitous turn of events. It really, really was. So Toronto had some injuries on their blue line. So they would naturally go to the American Hockey League team and ask to have some people sent up. Well, the AHL, Pittsburgh Hornets, didn't have anybody who was available at that time. So the next step was then to ask the Tulsa Oilers, "Hey, listen, who have you got who can fill in for a handful of games?" They didn't have anybody who was available at that time. So they went down to the Hollywood Wolves. So you have to think they went down 4 steps. And they talked to the folks with the Hollywood Wolves. Now, there were 2 people that were really instrumental in Bill's career. And one was Bob Gracie, who was a former Stanley Cup champion with the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1932. And he was the coach of the team, and he really saw some real promise with Bill. But the one who really, really was instrumental was a guy named Tommy Anderson. He went by the nickname Cowboy. And in 1941-42, he was the Hart Trophy winner as the National Hockey League's most valuable player. and because of the war, didn't get a chance to play any further beyond that. So he was playing on the Hollywood Wolves, and he was really working with Bill on his body checking, on his skating. So when the time came, Bob Gracie came and said, listen, have we got anybody who we can send up to the Toronto Maple Leafs? And Anderson said, yeah, he's as green as the hills, but this Barilko kid, he's going to show something there. We can, he would be the right guy to send. So he usurped all of the other levels and went up to the Toronto Maple Leafs, thinking that he was going to play for a handful of games. And as we heard at the beginning with Joe, you mentioned that he played for 5 years, winning 4 Stanley Cups during that time.
Which is unbelievable, especially when you think about, how long it's been since the Leafs won a Stanley Cup these days. So we actually we got video of Bill's first NHL goal, thanks to Paul Patsko. This is at Maple Leaf Gardens, February 8, 1947, against the Bruins. Howie Meeker slides it over to Barilko, who beats Frank Grimsick, the capper, in a 5-2 Leafs victory. Meeker had 2 goals and 2 assists that night. And Kevin, I'm thinking this is not long after that Barilko got called up that he got that goal.
No, that's for sure. One thing I should note is that we so often think of Bill Barilko and number 5. They're synonymous. But in fact, he started off wearing number 21. Then his next 2 seasons, he wore 19. It was only in his final season, the 1950-51 season, that he wore number 5. But when he came up, his very first game was against the Montreal Canadiens in Montreal. And I think they lost. I can't remember the score, but it was something like 10-2 or something like that. But what was the news from the Leafs side of things? It was that Bill Barilko knocked Elmer Locke, Maurice Richard into next week with his body checking. So he was the one who stood out on the Maple Leafs at that time in his very first game, a young 19-year-old kid playing in his first National Hockey League game. His first game in Toronto would have been his debut at Maple Leaf Gardens. And there he went and did the same sort of thing. So it was Boston, just probably, I think, his 3rd game that he played in the National Hockey League. And he scores a goal with Howie Meeker. This is such a great story.
So the heavy body work from the Barilko boys, is that a thing, Frank and Timmins? Is that something that they were renowned for?
Well, that's certainly what Billy was. His reputation was that if your head was down, you were going to get checked, and you're probably going to be seeing the boards pretty heavily. He had a great reputation, and one of the amazing things about Billy, he played hard hockey, tough hockey, but he was never cut, and he never lost a tooth.
Wow.
Can I just throw in a story as well, Joe?
Yes.
So the very first time he comes in, it's a crazy trip from Hollywood to Pittsburgh to Buffalo in a snowstorm, and he ends up in Toronto and barely any sleep, and he's tired. It's been a long way to go, and he goes straight to the rink for practice, and he's playing the game that he was taught in Hollywood, and he's body checking his teammates. And they had to take him aside and say, Bill, hang on here. You've got to tone it down a little bit. These are your teammates. So he came up with the system. If he saw one of his teammates who was there about to get hit, he would do a roadrunner, beep, beep, and then they would know that, oh, he's okay. And they would be prepared for Bill Barilko's hips or whatever it was going to be that he was going to get.
Yeah, he knew how to play the game one way, right? That's what it sounds like. Yeah. That's right. Didn't know how to back off. Yeah, I think that'd probably be like sparring with Mike Tyson. I don't know how to do this softly, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, so Bill Barilko won 4 Stanley Cups with the Leafs. Obviously, a pretty good team. Here's a clip from the late great Howie Meeker talking about the team that they had, which included, of course, Barilko.
Be on a team that we had Apps at center, Kennedy at center. Gus Bodner at center with the line from Bodner, Stewart, and Poyle. And could Poyle ever shoot a puck? And then we had the best goaltender in the league. We had the best coach in the league. And we were about 10 or 15 games into that first year. And Cowboy Anderson, who used to play for the New York Americans, was coaching a minor league team in Hollywood, I think, or somewhere on the East Coast, West Coast. And they called up Barilko, and he played his first game in Montreal. And he just solidified our defense. He made it big, he made it tough, he made it mean, he made it more skilled, and a hell of a hockey player. And could he hit?
Yeah, could he hit? Woohoo! So, what aside from being a guy who had trouble laying off the hits on the teammates, what kind of a teammate was Bill Barilko, Kevin?
He was adored by his teammates because he was really, really fun. And I'm going to put things in a very strange context here, but one of the things that he liked to do was change the lyrics of popular songs, a la Weird Al Yankovic or someone like that. So, Bill would be in the dressing room, keeping things light, changing the lyrics and making all of his teammates laugh. And that was a big part of what Bill was about. He was happy-go-lucky, but when he was on the ice, it was all business for sure. And one of the things that the teams did every Monday night, because they didn't have to play until Wednesday usually and go from there, but every Monday night, they would take their partners or their wives and go to the Old Mill restaurant to have a meal together and to dance and have some fun, hear some live music. And it really bonded that team together. And Bill was there, and Bill was, a very good-looking boy. They called him Hollywood Bill Barilko for a reason. And he dated different women. He had dated Miss Toronto for a while, and he dated a lovely lady a little bit later on who he was supposedly engaged to, etc. But he would he'd get up there, and apparently wasn't much of a dancer, but he loved to get up there and dance and just have a great time. And it really helped, along with all the others, bond everybody together and keep that team as solid as it was off the ice as they were on the ice.
And Frank, is that what you heard from your mom about Bill, about him being, a guy who would bring people together in a family setting as well?
Yeah, Mom adored her younger brother, or actually he was older. She adored him, and he was always great to Baba and to my mom and Alec. He was a very generous young man, and just think about the age of this kid getting called up to the Maple Leafs as a teenager. His career was short, but he was just a terrific individual. So not only did he bond the team together, he was the center of the family, at least as my mother has recollected.
Right, a rising star. Kevin, anything you want to add to that? To what Frank just said?
No, but just the 5-game tryout or whatever it was going to be was dismissed pretty readily, and he stayed with the team. There was no doubt he was an integral part of the team at that particular time. So he was not going back to Hollywood, Tulsa, or Pittsburgh at this point. He was a Toronto Maple Leaf. Found himself an apartment in Toronto and stayed here through the rest of his remaining days.
So a couple of years later now, we actually have a Christmas message from Bill Barilko to his fans. This is on the radio, along with host at the time, Wes McKnight. Let's have a listen.
All right. From Timmins via Hollywood, a defenseman came to the Maple Leafs, Bill Barilko. Bill?
Thank you, Wes. I'd like to say hello and very Merry Christmas to my mother and sister in Timmins and to all my friends there, and to say hello to all my radio fans, so to say, in Toronto and District.
Okay, Bill, and there's one thing I would like to ask you. What about a win tonight for those kids down at the Gardens on Young Canada Night?
Well, they can use one, and so can we.
What do you think of your chances of getting a couple of wins this Christmas and giving the fans a real present?
Well, Santa Claus better be around then.
A voice from beyond the grave. It's eerie but wonderful at the same time.
Yeah.
Frank, what do you think about when you hear that voice?
I just think I just so wish that I could have met him. I wish that his tragedy didn't happen, so that I could have seen him continue in his career and be part of that. I know of Billy from everything I've heard, everything that's been written, the scrapbooks, the Kevin's book, articles, interviews, and I think I know him, but I sure wish I had been able to spend time with him.
Yeah. He seems like a really wonderful man. I mean, just, yeah. For sure. Okay, so the big goal, let's talk about that. April 21st, 1951, Leafs and the Habs, Game 5 of the Stanley Cup final, tied at 2 in overtime. Howie Meeker, you're going to see him a lot today, works that puck in front. Barilko flies in, beats Jerry McNeil in the Habs net, leaves his feet kind of like Bobby Orr did a few years later, and it's a 3-2 victory for the Leafs. Gives them the Stanley Cup championship. All 5 games in this series were decided in overtime. Would you consider this a classic, Kevin?
Oh, without question, in my opinion, it's the greatest goal in Toronto Maple Leafs history. No doubt about it. Because of the drama that's around it, both in the hockey sense, but also the drama that surrounds the fact that that was the final goal that Bill would ever score. That would be the final time, other than for some photos, that Bill would be with those teammates. That summer, he went back to Timmins to spend time with his pals and with his family, and never got a chance to go back and enjoy the game that he loved so much.
Did he ever say what it was that prompted him to move in from the point at that particular time? Did he ever say anything about that?
Yeah, he did. It's actually a funny story because Bill was not a real offensive defenseman. He was terrific defensive defenseman. He could score a few goals, but he wasn't really an offensive defenseman. Gus Mortson, who was a teammate, was more of an offensive defenseman. So Bill was challenging some of the game, the Canadians during that game, and during the intermission after the third period, the coach Joe Primo, the great Joe Primo, who had been a Stanley Cup champion with the Leafs in 1932, Joe Primo sat him down and said, "Look, Bill, I don't want you crossing the blue line. In fact, if you cross the blue line, you're going to be fined, and it's going to be a fine of," and I think it was $50 or something, which was not an inconsiderable amount at that particular time. So all of a sudden, Bill is the puck comes out to the face-off circle, and Bill's at the blue line, and he's got to make a decision. Do I gamble here? Because if I gamble and lose, Maurice Richard, who's right there, will be on his own all the way down to face Turk Broda or Al Rowans at that time. But if I'm successful, I can keep the puck in deep, maybe even get a shot on goal. So he gambled and won the game. And as they were all celebrating at center ice, apparently Joe Primo whispered to him and said something about, "Congratulations, Bill. You disobeyed what I told you, but we're not going to fine you." And they both had a good laugh and went from there.
I mean, even if he had to fine him, that would be fine. Because of what happened.
Here's the
at that
$50.
particular time. Yeah, here's your $50, Joe. Okay, so we have some video of that post-game celebration. Conn Smythe, the general manager and owner, is there. Joe Primo, as you mentioned, the head coach right there. Teeter Kennedy, the captain of the club back then. And, of course, things were a little bit different. The cup just sat there looking pretty. Teeter put his hand on it, but that's kind of about it. That's not the celebration that they enjoy today.
No, it sure isn't. Just the evolution of the game in so many ways is pretty special. Back then, a Maple Leaf Gardens attendant would push a table out to center ice and place the cup on it, and there it sat for Clarence Campbell, or in that case it was Clarence Campbell, the NHL president, to present to the team captain, and there they were. And the ceremony would be moments in length, and then it would be taken to the dressing room from there, and off they went. But you can see the jubilation here. 4 Stanley Cup championships in 5 years. In fact, if you talk to team members, and sadly we don't have any of them left at this time, but when they were still with us, they would tell us that team should have won 5 in a row. Certainly, the Detroit Red Wings won in 1950, but the Leafs really felt that they should have won at that time, and that they would have won several more beyond that. They were just so strong, as Howie Meeker illustrated in that clip that you showed earlier on. So it's a dynasty for sure. We call it the first dynasty for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Bill Barilko was right at the center of it as well.
We saw Conn Smythe having a little chat there with Bill in that video, and it's like, hey, have you got anybody else in Timmins or Hollywood who we should be talking about? It did open the gates a little bit for the folks from Timmins, didn't it, Frank? There were some more coming in after that.
Well, you think about Alan Stanley, you think about Frank and Peter Mahavlich. Timmins was gold when it came to good hockey players in Northern Ontario. We had gold mines and we had gold hockey players.
Yeah. Let's talk. Okay, well, let's talk. So go ahead, Kevin. Finish up.
Well, I was just going to say, Toronto was in the catbird seat in so many ways. They had terrific scouts. And so with the scouts, they had what they called bird dogs, who were just people all across the country. Maybe they were paid, maybe they weren't, to let people know about, let the team know about some good players. But they had two other things going for them. One of them was the fact that Foster Hewitt was on the radio every single Saturday night. So every kid across the country was hearing the Toronto Maple Leafs and wanted to play for the team. And the other side was the fact that their junior affiliates, the Toronto Marlboros and the St. Michael's Majors, were very key too. But the St. Michael's Majors specifically were a Roman Catholic school. So every priest across the country wanted to make sure that his kids were taken care of with great educations and a chance to play professional hockey. So between Foster Hewitt, great scouting and bird dogs across the country, and the priests across the country, Toronto was in a really, really special place. And that's why they had such great players at that particular time.
Right up until the 60s, because St. Mike's and the Marlies produced so much talent, right? And it was, yeah. I remember being a Leafs fan when I was a kid, before the Oilers came to town, of course. And then, yeah. So let's talk about the circumstances around his death. Now, how did the fishing excursion come about? And who is Dr. Hudson? Frank, what can you tell us about that from a family perspective?
Well, Dr. Henry Hudson was a dentist in Timmins, and he had a float plane and loved to fish. And Billy loved to. He was a real outdoorsman, loved to fish. Did not like to eat fish, but when Dr. Hudson asked him about going up further north to some areas where there's going to be some really great fishing, Billy was jumping all over that. And so he loved the sport, didn't like to eat the fish, but loved to be out in the wilderness with Dr. Hudson.
Right. And your mom and his mom both try to talk him out of going. Is that true? That's what the way I understand it to be?
That was the infamous Friday's Unlucky. Billy, you've got training camp starting within a few weeks. You're going to be heading back to Toronto. This is not a good good idea. I don't want you to go. And Billy said, "Well, but Mom, it's just going to be a short trip. Where we'll be back. It'll be a weekend long." And so there's my mom trying to convince Billy to do what Mom wants him to do, which is don't go on this trip. And Billy's just sort of, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And off he went. And he went to to Baba's bedroom before he left early that morning and wanted to say goodbye. And Baba was so angry at him, she didn't roll over and acknowledge his best wishes. And she regretted that for the rest of her life.
You mentioned that when we were talking earlier, Frank, that, around the home, I mean, people didn't talk so much about Frank because Bill, because it brought up such difficult memories for your grandmother, right?
I didn't realize until I was older and we had moved to Toronto and quite frankly, starting my own family, how big a deal Bill Barilko was. When we lived in Timmins, I didn't know we had scrapbooks because Mom didn't bring them out. I didn't know we had Stanley Cup memorabilia simply because it was not discussed in our household, because Baba held on to this 1 in a million chance that Billy was going to come out of the wilderness, that he was going to survive, and he was still alive. And until he was confirmed dead, he might be alive. So we never talked about. I didn't know. I knew Billy Barilko was my uncle, and he played for the Maple Leafs. I didn't know how big it was until later in my life.
Kevin, was the circumstances around the death, in the beginning, yeah, there was some speculation that he was still alive, but clearly that was, the chances of that happening were slimmer and slimmer as time went on.
The newspapers were covering it. It was the largest aerial search in Canadian history, and it was front page news for quite some time. But because nobody could find any clue to where Bill and Dr. Hudson were, you would think you would find the wreckage or you'd find a clue somewhere, and there was nothing that could be found. All of a sudden, the speculation just got crazy. So, people started to speculate that because Dr. Hudson was a dentist, that in fact they had mined some gold. Somehow they'd gotten some gold, and he was smuggling out of the north and going to take it to somewhere else and make a great deal of money. And somebody else thought, well, because Bill comes from his family comes from what was at the time part of Russia, maybe what has happened now is that Bill has squirreled away and he's teaching those Russian hockey players how to play hockey. And it just got crazy. All of the circumstances around it, it all came to an end in 1961 when, in fact, the fuselage was found.
So, Frank, I understand that he was engaged at the time of his death. Is that correct? Whatever happened to his fiancée?
Well, I'm going to let our author talk about that part of the story because he knows it much better than I.
Thanks, Frank. It's just it's one of those. It's part of lore as well. So there was a lady named Louise Hastings that he was quite friendly with. In fact, engaged or not is open to debate to some degree, but they definitely had dated. They definitely had a relationship. She was expecting Bill to come back from the fishing trip to meet her and her family at their cottage, and then Bill would head off to training camp from there, which was being held in St. Catharines, Ontario at that time. Bill didn't show up for that family get together either. Louise has a ring now, whether it's an engagement ring or a friendship ring, or whether it's something that she bought as a memory of Bill, we're not sure. We've since lost Louise. She died a few years ago. A lovely, lovely lady. But during my research about Bill, it was peculiar to go to her home, because here was a lady who at that time would have been in her 70s, and there were pictures of Bill all through her apartment, a lovely apartment that she had. She'd been married on several occasions. She blames her marriage as failing for the fact that she held a flame for Bill all those years. So, fact or fiction, it's fanciful, no doubt about it. She's a lovely lady. She was a lovely lady who definitely had a deep, deep love for Bill Barilko.
The accident, I guess, the cup. Bill had his jersey raised to the rafters, and this is at the Air Canada Centre at the time. Very cool celebration. 13 of his former teammates were there, and of course, your mom was there too, Frank, as well as a tragically hip. And shortly after, Kevin, shortly after that, you finished writing the book Barilko Without a Trace. And we actually have some clips from your book launch, and we'd like to roll that.
Oh, dear.
Because it's so long ago, I was dubious about the whole process. The fact that the tragically hip-recorded 50 mission cap and brought Bill back to life, in essence, and to use the phrase, somewhat metaphorically, was really important, because a whole new generation was aware of who this Bill Barilko was and why he was important, and maybe were intrigued by the story only because they knew it musically. So, 50-some years later, it just has all the elements of great TV, great movies, great books, those sorts of things. You couldn't write a story like that because it would be unbelievable if you were creating it. The fact that it was nonfiction, the fact that it was a real story is just beyond compare.
It just shows you the interest, as you said, that still lives with the Barilko saga. Just amazing.
Tears still come, and it's so sad that he had such a short life. And imagine being on 4 Stanley Cups in 5 years and scoring the winning goal as a defenseman. I look back at his younger days when he couldn't skate, and all these things come back to me, and I'll always remember them. So there have been quite a few tributes to Bill. and I'm the lucky one to be taking part in all this.
So, Frank, when you see your mom there, yeah, go ahead. Kevin, were you going to say? Yeah.
I was 16 years old at the time. Hang on.
Yeah. I know you look great, buddy. So, Frank, when you see your mom talking like that, you see how proud she was of Bill and really in her glory at that particular time. How do you feel watching that?
Very proud. Mom was, well, all our moms are special, but she was so genuine in her love of her brother and keeping the story alive. And she kept it alive for our family. And my children and my grandchildren are going to understand and know the story of Bill Barilko with memorabilia. But my mom was the reason why we all have this. She kept the flame alive. She meets this wonderful man named Kevin Shea, who writes a book about Billy that we all enjoy, and the story just keeps going. And Mom was at the center of the Bill Barilko heritage and keeping it alive.
Kevin, what was it like for you to meet Anne, talk to Anne, and tap her for all the information which you used in the book?
Well, so I regarded Anne as a second mom. She and I were really close. I just love her. One of the reasons the book was even written was I noticed that I was working at the Hockey Hall of Fame, as I am now as well, and I noticed that a lot of people were asking for the photo, the famous Tarofsky photo of Bill from behind scoring on Jerry McNeil. And so I realized that there were a lot of people who were really intrigued by the story. And I knew that Anne was Bill's sister and her husband, Emil, and their son as well. And they were in the Hall of Fame on a regular basis. And I would sit and talk to them about it. And then I realized, well, wait a minute here. Okay, so that's one of the most requested photos in the Hockey Hall of Fame's archives. Bill's sister and the rest of the family are right here. I used to work in the music industry, and I worked very closely with the Tragically Hip, knew them very well. If anybody's going to write this book, I think I might be the right guy to do it. So from there, I just spent copious numbers of hours going through the scrapbooks, sitting with Anne, sitting with Emil, sitting with Barry, who is Frank's younger brother, talking about this wonderful family member and this amazing hockey player as well. And that's how the book came together. We were doing a book signing down in Windsor, which is my hometown. And I was really proud to introduce Anne and Emil to my mom down there. We were all excited because Chapters was going to do a big book signing with Anne and I. And by the time we got there, all 100 of their books had already been sold before we even got there. So it was really special. They had people going to other satellite locations trying to bring some books in for us, but we just had the most lovely time. And my mom and Anne just hit it off as though they were sisters. And it was really, really special. We've lost both of them now, but it was so wonderful to spend time with Anne for the duration of the time that we all worked together at the Hall of Fame, but certainly during the duration of writing the book, Barilko Without a Trace.
Dare I say it's a match made in heaven, really. It's like, perfect. You're the perfect guy to write this book. Frank, is that the way you see it? Your family sees it?
Absolutely. Kevin is a part of the family. He knows as much about our family and as anybody. So my brother and I look at Kevin Shea as just he's a Klisanich and he's a Barilko, and we're all enjoying each other's company whenever we're given the opportunity to get together.
Kevin, you've written a lot of books. Was this the best one to write?
Yeah, it was. It's there's a couple that stand head and shoulders over the others. One is the Toronto Maple Leafs Centennial History. To be asked to write that was a real honor, and that was a really special book for one reason. But this one was one where no co-writers, nobody else, just dig in and got a chance. The timing was impeccable. Not mine necessarily, just by kismet. But so many of Bill's teammates were still with us at that time. So many people, the receptionist for Dr. Hudson was still with us. Bill's best friend was still alive. I got a chance to talk to all of these people, family members, friends, teammates, they've all had, not all, but most have passed on since. We've been able to chronicle the story through their stories, and we're enough to be blessed enough to be in the right place at the right time to be able to capture the magic of the Barilko story.
So, Frank, is there one thing that sort of that you would like people to know about your Uncle Bill that they may not have known or may not know? Is there something that sort of sticks out for you? Is like, this is what I want people to remember about my uncle, or to know about my Uncle Bill.
Well, if there's ever a story to tell young hockey players, the word determination, commitment. Billy played hockey because he loved the game. And then he played it at a level that allowed him to be at the highest level in the National Hockey League. He achieved things that I'm sure he didn't think were possible. So, kids, if you have a dream about achieving that kind of success, don't give up. Fulfill that dream. Try to do everything you can to make it happen. And the story of Bill Barilko is about a young boy who achieved greatness and is remembered to this day. The 75th anniversary of his goal will be in 26. So, what a tribute to the story, to the book, to the man Billy Barilko. And so, hang on to your dreams and do everything you can to reach to fulfill them.
Kevin, anything to add to that?
Couldn't say it any better than that, Frank. So erudite that way. It's wonderful. Maybe I just say that there are dreams can be achieved, but it's important that you keep family first. You remain determined, and that dreams really can come true. Never let that dissuade you from your goals. So that's exactly it. The Bill Barilko story. What a story.
And couldn't the Leafs use a player like Bill Barilko today, yeah?
Oh.
No doubt.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us to relive the story of Bill Barilko. It's been really fun for me, and I thank you so much for being here.
Been a real pleasure to be part of it as well. Frank, great to see you. Joe, love your show. Thank you for allowing us to talk about Bill Barilko.
Thank you, Joe.
All right,
Kevin,
thanks,
great to see you.
All right, back after this. Thanks, guys.
Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Visit moregolf.ca. You'll find everything a golfer could need, from balls, gloves, clubs, custom fitting opportunities, training gear, valuable accessories, and some great deals. Looking for that perfect gift idea for the golfer in your life? Go to moregolf.ca today.
My Coastal Swiss pick of the week. Last time out, I picked our Hot Toddy in the 8th race of Thursday night's card in the sleet. It was looking good with our Hot Toddy in the lead coming down the stretch, but Give Me Carrots with Phil Hudon in the buggy would get by. Hudon is also the owner and trainer of Give Me Carrots. The one horse, Belvedere Bronx, got it for second, and that 6-1 exactor returned $297. Our Hot Toddy, well, he slipped to fourth. This week, I'm looking at the 9th race on Thursday night's card. I like the number 6 horse Bella Cavala coming off a strong second place finish. I also take the 1-2-6 Exacta and Trifecta box. And yes, our hot toddy will be there. For all the racing updates, visit Costa TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Go to hpibet.com for your wagering options.
Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to hpibet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's hpibet.com.
And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. Reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network, Zingo TV, and Buzz TV Live. Also, check out the show on YouTube. Some wonderful clips, some shorts. Like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Thanks once again to Kevin Shea and Frank Klisanich for being on the program. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Do you want to buy or sell a home? Could 31 years of real estate experience help you? Why not speak to an amazing team that loves to overpromise and overdeliver? Aldo has a tremendous team of experts on staff. They are committed to making your next real estate transaction smooth and comfortable. Call 416-GET-ALDO or visit getaldo.com. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.